Hi everyone, my name is Stacy Brewer, and today I want to talk about motivation, how I've experienced it as both a parent and as a classroom teacher. When I started planning this presentation, I kept coming back to the phrase, the essence of motivation. Motivation isn't always visible. It's more like a spark or a shift in energy. You notice when it's there, and you definitely notice when it's missing. Before this course, I understood motivation mostly through encouragement and praise. But as I worked through these theories, I realized motivation is much more layered. It's shaped by what learners believe about themselves, what they value, and how much autonomy they feel, and whether a task feels meaningful or achievable. So today, I'm sharing the real moments where these ideas showed up in my life, at home, in my classroom, and in the way I think about learning. Understanding motivation more deeply has changed how I support the learners around me, whether they're my own children or the students I work with every day. As I started thinking about why motivation matters to me as both a mom and a teacher, I realized these ideas show up in my life every day. The biggest thing I've learned is that motivation is supported, not forced. I can't make my daughters or my students feel motivated, but I can create the conditions that help it grow. Safety, encouragement, and meaningful choices. I've also learned that people thrive when competence, autonomy, expectancy, and value are nurtured. When learners feel capable, have some control, believe they can succeed, and see the task as meaningful, motivation becomes much more natural. And motivation has to be individualized. What works for one child may not work for another. My daughters respond to completely different things. And the same is true in my classroom. Every learner has their own puzzle piece, and it's part of my job in figuring out how they fit. These ideas really are the foundation for everything else I'll talk about today. I wanted to share two real motivation challenges I've faced with my daughters because they show how differently motivation can look depending on the child and the situation. With my oldest daughter, expectancy value theory helped me see that her struggle with reading wasn't about ability. It was about expectancy and value. She needed to believe she could be successful and to feel that reading mattered to her personally. Once those pieces were supported, her motivation grew naturally. With my youngest daughter, competence and autonomy theory helped me understand that trying a new food required her to feel capable and in control. Encouragement alone wasn't enough. She needed choices, reassurance, and tiny steps forward. These two stories remind me that motivation isn't one size fits all. Even in the same family, the strategies that can be completely different. And that's exactly why understanding these theories matters. This motivation story is about my oldest daughter and her relationship with reading. She avoided reading unless it was required and didn't feel confident she'd enjoy or finish anything she started. Before learning about expectancy value theory, I tried rewards, popular books, buddy reading. Nothing worked because she had low expectancy and low value. So I created a reading experience that targeted both. She chose the book, the spot, and the snack. I kept the time short and read beside her. She used my Kindle, and that made the chapter feel manageable. When the timer went off, she wanted to finish the chapter. And the next day, she asked to read again. Those small shifts showed her expectancy and her value were growing. This reminded me that motivation isn't about pushing harder. It's about creating conditions where success feels possible and meaningful, something I bring directly into my classroom. This next motivation story is about my youngest daughter, who suddenly became extremely picky with food. She reacts before anything even touches her mouth, insisting it's gross just from looking at it. For this motivation act, I chose glazed carrots since she already eats them raw. I framed it as helping me with a school project and asked her only to look at it and smell it. But as soon as it hit her plate, her beliefs kicked in. She said she just believed it would be gross, which fits casual attribution theory. She never tasted it, but she stayed calm. She looked at it, smelled it, and stayed at the table. Those small steps mattered, and it reminded me that in the classroom, some students won't take the final step right away. If they move a little closer, show curiosity, or stay engaged, that's still meaningful progress. The motivation is often a slow shift in belief. These two motivation stories taught me that motivation is deeply tied to what a child believes about themselves and the task in front of them. With my oldest daughter, expectancy value theory helped me see she wasn't avoiding reading because she couldn't do it. She didn't expect success, and she didn't see value. Once I lowered the pressure and gave her meaningful choices, her motivation shifted quickly. With my youngest daughter, competence and autonomy theory helped me understand that her reactions to new foods came from internal beliefs, not stubbornness. Even small steps forward mattered. Together, these stories remind me that motivation has to be individualized. Small steps, meaningful choices, confidence, and relevance all drive engagement. And these lessons shape how I support every learner in my classroom because each child brings their own beliefs, fears, and motivations. One of the biggest lessons I learned from both motivation stories is how important it is to build competence. When learners feel capable, when they experience small wins and see themselves making progress, motivation becomes so much more natural. With my oldest daughter, competence grew when she realized she could finish a chapter and that reading didn't have to feel overwhelming. With my younger, competence looked like simply smelling the carrot and staying calm. Tiny steps, but meaningful ones. In the classroom, competence is built the same way. Small wins matter. Scaffold tasks matter. Clear, encouraging feedback matters. When students feel like they can succeed, even in small ways, their confidence grows, and that confidence becomes the foundation for intrinsic motivation. This strategy isn't about making tasks easier, it's about making success visible. When learners see themselves improving, even a little, they're far more willing to engage, take risks, and keep going. One major lesson I learned from both motivation stories is the importance of supporting autonomy. When learners have meaningful choices and some ownership, their engagement increases almost immediately. For my oldest daughter, autonomy was the turning point. Choosing the book, the reading spot, and even the snack made reading feel enjoyable instead of like a chore. For my youngest, autonomy looked like control over tiny steps. Looking at the carrot, smelling it, deciding if she was ready. Even though she didn't eat it, staying calm and engaged was real progress for her. In the classroom, autonomy works the same way, offering choices, letting students take ownership, and giving them space to make decisions helps them feel respected and capable. Supporting autonomy isn't about letting students do whatever they want. It's about creating opportunities for ownership, which naturally increases engagement. Increasing expectancy. A learner's belief that they can succeed was a major theme in both of my motivation stories. When someone doesn't believe they can be successful, motivation drops immediately. For my oldest daughter, expectancy grew through guided practice and modeling. Sitting beside her, reading the same book, and keeping the time short helped her experience success in real time. For my youngest, expectancy looked like tiny, low-pressure steps with paired encouragement. She didn't have the same outcome, but staying calm and engaging showed her belief in herself was slowly shifting. In the classroom, increasing expectancy is just as important. Guided practice, modeling, and clear encouragement help students see themselves as capable. When learners believe they can succeed, they're far more willing to try, persist, and engage. Enhancing value was one of the most important strategies I learned from these motivation stories. Expectancy matters, but value is what makes a learner actually want to engage. When a task feels meaningful or enjoyable, motivation grows naturally. For my oldest daughter, increasing value was the turning point. Choosing the book, the reading spot, and the snack made reading feel enjoyable instead of like a chore, and that's what led her to finish the chapter and ask to read again. For my youngest, value looked different. She didn't see any reason to try a new food. So even tiny steps, smelling the carrot or staying calm, were meaningful. Helping me with my school project gave her just enough purpose to participate. In the classroom, enhancing value means connecting tasks to students' interest and showing relevance. When students understand why something matters, their willingness to engage increases. Value is often the spark that gets motivation started. When I compare these two theories, what stands out most is how each one helped me understand a different part of my daughter's motivation, and honestly, a different part of myself as a mom and a teacher. Expectancy value theory helped me see that my oldest wasn't avoiding reading because she couldn't do it. She avoided it because she didn't expect success and didn't see value. Once I lowered the pressure and gave her meaningful choices, her motivation shifted. Competence and autonomy theory explain my youngest daughter's reactions to her foods. Her fear wasn't about the food, it was about what she believed would happen. Even tiny steps forward mattered because progress isn't always a big victory. The overlap between these theories is where I see my role most clearly. Both emphasize learner-centered support and intentional scaffolding. They taught me that motivation isn't something we give kids, it's something we help them build. In my classroom, this changed how I view hesitant learners. Some need value, some need expectancy, and some need competence and autonomy. These theories aren't competing, they're complementary, and together they remind me that motivation is deeply personal. These motivation challenges didn't just help me understand my daughters. They changed the way I think about teaching and parenting. They showed me that motivation looks different for every learner, and what works beautifully for one child may fall flat for another. My oldest needed value, relevance, and meaningful choice to enjoy reading. My youngest needed competence, autonomy, and tiny low-pressure steps just to feel safe trying something new. Those differences reminded me that every learner brings unique beliefs and emotions into a task. The same is true in the classroom. Striving readers, multilingual learners, gifted students, and students with exceptionalities all need different combinations of expectancy, value, scaffolding, autonomy, and small steps towards competence. These stories taught me that motivation must be flexible and individualized. Progress isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's a finished chapter, and sometimes it's simply staying calm at the table. These 4 motivation interventions became meaningful once I saw them play out in real life. They weren't just theories. They were the tools that helped me support my daughters in moments that were frustrating and very real, and I realized they translate directly into the classroom. Scaffolding showed up when my oldest finished a chapter and when my youngest stayed calm enough to smell a new food. Those tiny wins built competence. Offering meaningful choices transformed reading for my oldest, and it worked the same way with students. Choosing topics, tools, or partners increase autonomy. Modeling and guiding practice help both girls feel supported, and in school it builds expectancy because students see themselves succeeding with help. And connecting tasks to interest increased value. When reading aligned with my daughter's interests, everything changed. Together, these interventions remind me that motivation grows when success feels possible, choices feel meaningful, and learning feels worth the effort. These experiences taught me that motivation is truly a partnership. Whether I'm working with my daughters at home or supporting my students in the classroom, motivation grows when we work together, not when we push alone. I've learned that small changes can create big impact. A 10-minute reading session, a tiny brave bite, a meaningful choice, those moments add up. And most importantly, I've learned that motivation can be supported intentionally. When we build competence, offer autonomy, increase expectancy, and enhance value, we create environments where learners feel capable and willing to try. These strategies work because they honor the whole child, their emotions, their beliefs, and their need for connection. Motivation isn't accidental, it's something we can nurture every day. This quote captures the heart of everything I've learned. When we understand what drives a learner, we finally know how to help them grow. Motivation is shaped by beliefs, emotions, past experiences, and the environments we create. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope you found value in this presentation and feel inspired to support the learners in your life with intention and compassion.